Happy Sunday afternoon, everyone. It's time to talk a little baseball with me, Doug. One of the shows here on the Legend Network. Monday through Friday, you get Lenny, and you get his takes on a day-to-day basis. On Saturday, you get Andrea, and she comes in with a little slightly different version. I come in on Sunday, give a third opinion, and of course, you get us all. You get a bunch of us on Monday night at 8:00 with the roundtable at 8 p.m. This is the Dugout, the only show clinically proven to be 73% effective. It's been 3 days since our last no-hitter. Congrats to Zach Davies, Ryan Tepera, Andrew Chafin, and Greg Kimbrell. Cubs are 42-35, 2 games back of the guaranteed to fade Milwaukee Brewers. Wander Franco is hitting a Jack Peterson-esque 105. Trevor Bauer and Sandy Alcantara have now pitched as many innings as the 2020 leaders. So going forward, we have to see what pitchers are going to fade when they're asked to pitch 260% more innings in 2021. COVID is wreaking havoc in the College World Series. It sent North Carolina State home, and it postponed a game between Vanderbilt and I can't remember who they're playing. And also they're having trouble with large, mean raccoons. And you are in the dugout here with me on Sunday, the 27th of June. I'd just like to recap. We've been doing this for about 10 weeks now, and to recap, the reason why we're doing it is we're doing this to give you a recap of the important changes that happened in the past week, hopefully in a 1 hour-ish podcast, and to give a different opinion of what you hear the rest of the week on this network. I think that this network was at its best when we had 6 or 8 different voices saying all sorts of different things, and you, the listener, got to listen to a bunch of different ideas and come up with your own. We made you better fantasy baseball players. And you guys made us better fantasy baseball players, or at least me. I can talk for myself, because we had to really hone in on what was right and what was working and what wasn't. We couldn't just kind of theoretically say things. And that's what I do in this show is I play about half my leagues in really deep leagues, and I play about half my leagues in really fairly shallow leagues, 10, 12-team leagues and 15-team or greater leagues. And there's a completely different viewpoint on both things, but the things that I'm sharing with you are exactly what I'm going through when I'm deciding what I'm going to do with the waiver wire. So somebody pointed out that, this year, because all the injuries, people are really low on FAB money, and that's an important thing to note. You should look at the FAB money that everybody has. It's something that everyone's sort of used to doing at the end of the season, but it's actually coming up more than you want. I'm in a 15-team league where I have $289 of a FAB left out of a $1,000 budget, and there are only 9 teams with more money than I have, and one of them only has $4 more. I mean, there's a lot of teams that have spent a lot of money. So you may need to start conserving your money so you have something at the end. One of the advice that I always give at FAB is that you want to have, in a $100 league, you want to have about $10 left for the last month. In a $1,000 league, you want to have about $50 left for the last month, because you're still going to get injuries, and you'd rather not leave those spots blank. And running out of money means you leave the thing blank. I know a lot of leagues play with $0 pickups. I think that's not the standard rule, and if you have that, it's a different story. But in the leagues I play in, there is no $0 pickups. There is an opportunity cost to anything you pick up. And so it keeps you from being too insane on some of your bids, even though I've made some really awful ones this year. And I've made some great ones too, because that's what this game is about. Conserve money, pick your battles where it's going to come up. I'm going to talk about one of them that I'm going to look at. I haven't really talked about the sticky stuff because I think it's been talked to death. I think that the only thing that I think differently about it is that I think that they're handling it reasonably well. Their hand was forced because pitchers weren't content with just suntan lotion and rosin combination, which they probably could have got away with forever. My friend of mine, Cando, he gave the analogy. It's like you work at a company that has 30 minutes for lunch, right? But because everybody knows that just to get out to McDonald's and back and eat is going to take you about 30, 35 minutes, no one ever said anything about you coming back, 5 minutes, 10 minutes late, right? But then some people start taking 3-hour lunches, which is what these pitchers are doing. We're doing. And all of a sudden you have no choice but to crack down on it on everybody. It's not because of the umpires, it's not because of MLB baseball, it's because of the other pitchers going way too far. The rules are the rules. It says very clearly no foreign substances on there. That's not very ambiguous. I could sit there and say, well, maybe get some dirt on the ball. That's not a foreign substance, but dirt is specifically named. spit is specifically named, but if you're bringing something in from outside, something you bought at Hobby Lobby or at a sports supply store, you knew you were doing something wrong. And the reason why they're stripping Max Scherzer is because of you pitcher that used stuff more than necessary. I know what went on is 2020 was a rough year, and you knew damn well that nobody was going to be checking anybody because it was a tough year anyway, and they didn't want any outside scandals, so you get away with murder. But you didn't come back for 2021. And I'm noticing people coming into the chat room right here. The other thing that went on this week was they had the first ever MLB Combine on Friday. I watched a bit of it. It was interesting to me, but I'm a big baseball fan, and I think it was interesting because it was the first year they did it. Though the truth is, it was pretty boring all in all. There was no stats that you saw there that couldn't have been acquired elsewhere. I've heard from people interviewed about things like players and prospects and managers and things like that, where they said they liked the idea of getting everyone together in one place so they could talk, because you can get a better feel for who these players are. And it's amazing, as deep as the MLB draft normally is, how many players you draft that you never ever actually met. All you know is that, from YouTube videos or maybe from some scouting videos that you have privately. Maybe it's not a good fit. I think that's a good thing. I think it'll be good going forward. And I also think that they'll figure out how to make it more television friendly going forward. The one thing it does point out is that in the NFL Combine will get as many or more viewers than many of the baseball games that run against it. And there's just something wrong with you NFL football fans. If you're going to watch that for 2 hours, you're better off watching golf or just like watching the static on a station that's not there. There's nothing very memorable that comes from those things. I think in the entire history of the NFL Combine, the only thing I can still remember is when UCF graduate and one-arm man, Shaquem Griffin, led all players in the most number of reps with the bench lift. And that's in 30 years of combines. There's been one memorable moment. One. And so, yeah, they'll do the ML Combine further on, and they'll get better at making it a TV-friendly thing. And it's good for the players and the management to meet, especially after last year where they shortened the draft even more. I don't know if they're going to have the short draft this year. I probably should look into that. And with that, we want to get to the say hello to the chat room. I see Andrea's out there. I see a couple of guests. Daniel, my good man, welcome aboard. Hope you're the best of all possible Sunday mornings. And we'll get to the injury report. I start out with returning guys, and I do this really fast, and I'm going to explain myself a little more today because people ask why you do what you do. This is because sometimes things get away from you and you don't hear that your player's been activated, so I want to make sure the name is mentioned. So if you have the player and you wanted to activate him, you can. So this week, we saw the return of Garrett Cooper, Kyle Tucker, Cody Bellinger, Michael Conforto, George Springer, Jeff McNeil, Alex Dickerson, and Darren Ruff in the outfield. Austin Hedges in Cleveland catching. First baseman Luke Voigt, Joey Votto, Max Muncy return. Those are some pretty big names. Chris Owings in Colorado. Pitchers Danny Duffy, Max Scherzer, Adbert Alzolay. So if those guys are on your teams and they're on your IL, you can activate them if you want, and you probably should. If you don't want to activate them, you probably should cut them. Find something better for your roster. A couple guys that are nearing return, the guys that are on rehab this week. I'll just throw some names out there. Outfielder of Detroit, Derek Hill, had a couple good games when he was up there. St. Louis outfielder Harrison Bader is out of rehab. Philadelphia shortstop Didi Gregorius. Texas outfielder David Dahl. San Francisco second baseman Tommy LaStella, though he actually hurt his hamstring, so he's got pushed back he's going to be pushed back in his return for about 2 to 3 weeks. Cleveland outfielder Franmil Reyes and his brother from another mother, Detroit outfielder Victor Reyes, though there's no relation there whatsoever. Pitchers, San Francisco Aaron Sanchez, Arizona reliever J.P. Buskowskis, Cincinnati pitcher Sonny Gray, Miami pitcher Nick Nieder, and Atlanta pitcher Touki Toussaint. And some guys like Touki Toussaint I always bring up because I like to say their names. They're guys with 80 grade names. And we got a new one this week, guy we never heard before. On the IL, we lost. Last night it was kind of a weird night because usually there's some people that have sat out a few games before Sunday night, and I have to talk about them returning, but there was nobody. But a bunch of people went out last night of the games with injuries. The Orioles second baseman Freddie Galvis exited the second with what was originally reported as a leg injury, but is updated to be a quad injury. Rangers outfielder Willie Calhoun exited the game with a left forearm injury. Phillies outfielder Bryce Harper, the biggest name of the night, left the game after being hit by pitch by Jake DeGrom in the foot. I don't remember what inning it was. Wasn't the first. Ketel Marte of Arizona left the game, re-aggravating that old hamstring. And Milwaukee Colton Wong, who just returned, left the game with left calf tightness. And those guys you can check out. There's none of those guys are going to be playing today, and they might be headed toward worse things. Take a look at that. People heading to the injured list this week that have gone. On the pitching side, Josh Lemming of the Rays has a right calf strain. Aaron Savali, who was leading the American League in wins, had a sprained right middle finger. You know which one that is? No. We do have a video aspect to it, but I still try to keep this thing PG. Max Fried of the Atlanta's has a blister on his left hand. Cincinnati reliever extraordinaire who just returned, TJ Antone, left with a right forearm strain. The Yankees, very good setup man, Zach Britton, left with a left hamstring strain. Philadelphia's Sam Coonrod, I bring him up because Philadelphia's bullpen is in shambles, but Coonrod's not even an option because he's out with a forearm tendonitis. Cincinnati's closer committee included Lucas Sims until he went on the IL with a sprained right elbow, and he'll be gone for a while. For the Orioles, Cesar Valdez had already been out of the mix, but he went on the IL with lower back strain. And starting pitcher for the Milwaukee Brewers, Brad Anderson, had a right knee contusion. Those are the major pitchers. In the outfield, Oakland lost Mark Canha with a left hip sprain. Justin Upton, who's always injured, was out with a right lower back strain. Minnesota's Byron Buxton got a left hand fracture, also on a hit by pitch. And we had just gotten him back, and he's gone for 3 or 4 weeks at least. In one of my leagues, somebody was so fed up that they cut the guy in. In a head-to-head league, you have a playoff thing down the road. So the important thing is you make the playoffs, then you have the best possible roster then. So I made some room. I cut the guy that I liked that was on my IL, Nico Horner, to make room for an injured Byron Buxton. At first base, we lost Brandon Belt, right knee inflammation. And as much as I love Brandon Belt, this is the injury that's pushing him off my must roster list. I'm not going to tell anyone to do that because he's just hurt too much. When he plays, he's good, but he doesn't play enough. Daniel Vogelbach of Milwaukee, he went on the IL with strained left hamstring, bringing back the frustrating Keston Hiura. Jonathan Villar of the Mets has a right calf strain. He's on the list. Christian Arroyo of the Boston Red Sox has right knee contusions. He will no longer be batting leadoff, and they bring in a guy that really has no leadoff skills whatsoever to bat leadoff, Michael Chavis. Taylor Walls is some very convenient right wrist tendonitis with the bringing up of Wander Franco, and Kansas City put Adalberto Mondesi back on the IL with a right strained left oblique. A couple guys transferred to 60 days. There's 2 notes in here. One is that Mike Soroka hurt himself again. He won't be pitching this year for the Braves. And J.D. Davis, who I thought was just about to return, has a left hand sprain, so they moved him to the 60-day. It doesn't mean that much because he's already been out for quite a little while, but I thought he was going to be returning. He'd be one of the guys you'd gear up for. Seattle's Evan White has a left hip strain, gone to 60 days, and Joey Lucchesi of the Mets is on the 60-day with a left elbow strain. Those are the injuries for the week, and the guys that have come back, I think a couple of minor trades. The Pirates traded relief pitcher Yandel Gustave and Troy Stokes, and right fielder Troy Stokes Jr. to Milwaukee for catcher Samuel Escudero. And Seattle acquired outfielder Wyatt Matheson after he was designated for assignment by Tampa Bay for just cash. San Francisco is in need of some outfielders, so Wyatt Matheson might see some time out there. Which brings us to the outfield at 12:15. And with a little bit of a news on the outfield, St. Louis, of course. St. Louis selected the contract of Lars Nootbaar, who's another player with an 80-grade name. We only bring him up because we love the name. Tuki Toussaint, Chadwick Tromp, Caleb Badu, Lars Nootbaar. And if you stay to the end of the show, I will give you my recipe for no-bake Lars Nootbaars. That's a little bonus you get for staying to the very end. It won't be on the podcast. It's only if you're here. Houston, Chas McCormick has taken a seat with Kyle Tucker returning. Tony Kemp has moved mostly into the leadoff spot for the Oakland A's with Mark Canha out. Tristan Profar is definitely the odd man out in the San Diego Padres outfield. Tyrone Taylor returned from the IL, and now is splitting time center fielder with Jackie Bradley Jr. Bradley being the better fielder and Taylor being the better hitter. Then again, most everybody's a better hitter than Jackie Bradley Jr. Ian Happ slump sees them turning more and more to Jake Marisnick, and I do think that Marisnick will see more time in center field for the Cubs than most people will expect because the bat is okay and the fielding is plus. Washington brings back Gerardo Paro. He just played one game, but that's a little bit of pressure for Victor Robles. And the other thing that's great about him is his walk-up song is, of course, Baby Shark, do. But he's also a halfway decent player, and he's somebody definitely to watch. Akil Baddoo of Detroit is leading off versus righties, and he's not playing versus lefties. That actually might be a pretty good system for that guy because he doesn't hit lefties very well, and he's basically really good versus right-handed hitters. And even though you might get 5 days or 4 days instead of 6, at least they'll all be good days. Robbie Grossman bats leadoff in those odd days, and Grossman bats third when Akil Baddoo is leading off. Even with that, Des Cameron is getting into center field with some frequency. Minnesota's Nick Gordon, and friend of the show, which we know him as G. Cinco, has got his 9th start in the outfield, and with Buxton being gone for a bit longer, he actually is a decent little play. And the Chicago White Sox, Brian Goodwin, the outfielder, taking over there for the injury to Leury Garcia, actually. He's batting second, but he's not doing as much with it as I thought he would do. When he filled in for the Angels 2 years ago, he was okay. Not great, okay. And batting second, the White Sox might have had higher hopes for them. Which brings you to the players that we may or may not recommend. Well, mostly we'll recommend it, but there's different styles of recommendation. One is the guy that you really should have, and there's guys that you probably would pick up if you really needed to, and then there's desperation pickups. In the shallow leagues, one guy that I actually did pick up was Steven Duggar to replace somebody. I don't even remember who. Somebody I put on the IL. And there's a bit of a log jam on a lot of teams. And San Francisco is no different. They have Jalen Davis coming back. They have Evan Longoria coming back. They had Tommy Lacella coming back. Plus they have all these other. But Duggar has hit this year. He's hit .325 with six home runs and 6 stolen bases. I don't know if I 100% believe that he's a 2020 guy as that pace is, but you can't argue with 6 home runs and 6 stolen bases. Tony Kemp, we talked about last week, still available in 17% of leagues. Hunter Renfroe in 22. Akil Baddoo is somebody that I think should be since May 7th. He's hitting 342 with a 472 on-base percentage. But the big thing is the 6 stolen bases, which makes him very worthwhile in roto leagues. Jake Fraley and Taylor Ward, we talked about before. Jake Bowers is coming over to Seattle. Is hitting .309 with 1 stolen base and 1 home run in 15 games. And I'm not saying, he's a guy that tapped out in Tampa, tapped out in Cleveland, and now looks reborn in Seattle. I don't believe it, but if you need somebody, especially a short-term fill-in, you can ride that guy while he's hot. Dylan Moore actually qualifies at first base also. Since the 12th of June, which is a return from his injury, it's not the greatest in the world, but he's hitting .250 with a 342 on-base percentage with a home run and stolen base. I think there's more better stuff coming from him. And, of course, guys that we've talked about in the past is Josh Rojas and Alex Kirilloff are 43 and 31% owned. So there's some decent choices at first base, at outfield. Sorry, we're starting with outfield. These are all outfield. Did I say first base still more? These are all outfield. Sorry about that mistake. The guys that I'm most focused on in this group are Alex Kirilloff, Akil Baddoo, and Steven Duggar. I still like Fraley and Ward a good deal, and Kemp. Now, in the deeper leagues, the 15-team, the 400 rostered players, Jake Bowers, as we said before, is 70% owned in NFBC. Tony Kemp is 46% owned, and he would be one of the guys I'd recommend. You got some guys that are doing playing time stuff like Brian Goodwin on the White Sox, Guillermo Heredia of the Atlanta Braves, Dez Cameron, 10% owned for the Tigers. They brought up San Francisco Giants brought up Lamont Wade Jr. after sitting him down after 3 days to come up and play first base. He's 46% owned. I actually like Darren Ruff better. He was hitting. I mean, before he got hurt the same week that Brandon Belt got hurt the last time, and going into that, he was hitting 244, but with a 378 on base percentage and 6 home runs, and that was only in 111 at bats. He had just come back. He was a guy that used to play for the Phillies. He had just come back from hitting quite well in the Korean leagues, and it looked like he was showing something there, especially plate discipline and some power. I think that he is the better guy to play first base for them, though they might need him in the outfield short term. Phillip Evans, who had a really hot start for Pittsburgh, wound up qualifying at third base and outfield, and also now at third base and outfield. He's been hitting better of late. He had a great start, a bad middle. Last 14 games, he's hitting about 250 with a home run. I'm not saying he's a really good pickup, but in any league where you would start Hunter Dozier, I think I'd prefer Phillip Evans. Luke Williams, we talked about, is an infielder there. I worry a little bit about his playing time. I do like Cole Calhoun, who by this time next week will be on a rehab assignment, meaning that if you can get ahead of it on a fab bid, he's going to be cheaper this week. He'll probably cheaper next week, but you don't know for certain, and it'll be expensive the week following. And then you have Jarren Duran of the Boston Red Sox, who hasn't played yet as a rookie. He was probably of the prospects, he looked like the best hitter in the USA qualifying. Luke Williams did look a little bit better than him, and in the minors and 170 plate appearances, coming into last year, people looked at him as a really good speed glove guy with a decent enough bat and on base to stay in the majors, but he might be light on the power in the vein of a Nick Madrigal or a Nico Horner. So he has changed his stance. He's worked with a hitting coach. So far in 170 plate appearances, he's not only stole 8 bases, but he has 13 home runs in the minors, hitting 284 with 374 on base percentage. In the USA qualifying, the people who were talking during the broadcasters were saying that their expectation, the USA team expectation, was that he was not going to make it to the Olympics. Maybe they keep him down. They keep him down so he can play for USA baseball in the Olympics. But they said at the time that they're looking for a June call-up. And last I checked, June is almost over, so the time is drawing nigh. If you can get him ahead of the curve, that's that. So that's it on the deep leagues. Those would be my three biggest recommendations would be to squirrel away Jarren Duran, squirrel away Cole Calhoun, and then Tony Kemp. And if you needed a fourth guy, Bowers would be the next guy down. Edward Olivares is only on 10%. He's kind of I think that he's a pretty decent player, but Kansas City is screwing around with him. And I think that people always talk about guys that have that are really, really kind of dull. I'll give you 2 names, Chas McCormick and Eli White. McCormick actually did some things to make people happy about him with the Tucker return. He's not batting in that lineup anymore on these lineups, so both those guys are no's for me. Which brings us to, I'd like to take this moment, one of the good guys, Mitch Hairston, is in the chat room, and I know they're talking about stuff between each other. Which brings us to first base and third base, and we're at 12:23. Trying very hard to get this done in an hour. And the news, not a lot of news here. They're actually a lot. Most teams have stabilized what they've been doing. Even the teams that are just kind of a cluster of just who knows what goes where, like the Tampa Bay Rays, are doing it in a way that seems fairly routine. Like we know now that this guy is only going to play 4 days a week, and they're going to jump. As much as I might like J-Man Choi or like how hard DeAndre Diaz hits the ball, they're going to split time at that. The one interesting thing about Tampa Bay, well, I'll come to that when I get there. This week, Miami optioned Lewin Davis. San Francisco recalled Lamont Wade Jr. He's in the first base grouping. Milwaukee recalled Keston Hiura. It's hard to recommend Hiura to anybody because of how bad he's been, But if you literally have space, the general path that it goes with these rookies, if they actually turn out, is they look horrible, they look horrible, they look horrible, they look horrible. Then one day they look great. There's no in between. There's nobody that gets steadily a little bit better. So if you can squirrel that guy away, I can understand that. I'm probably not doing it. With Voigt's return, New York option Chris Gittens. Kansas City recalled Ryan O'Hearn. Springer's return sends George Springer's return to Toronto sends Rowdy Tellez to AAA. Lamont Wade's call-up is leading up, but I'm betting that Darren Ruff will win the belt substitution sweepstakes. The Texas Rangers' Nate Lowe, or Lau, however, I think he's the low. He's the low one, not the Lau one. Has moved up to number 2 in the lineup, replacing Willie Calhoun, who's slumping, has moved him to 5th or 6th. And Kansas City's Ryan O'Hearn, the guy they just called up, is batting 4th for them because players that they had high expectations for, like Jorge Soler and Hunter Dozier, are just not cutting the mustard this year. At third base side, Texas recalled Andy Ibanez, or I think it's Ibanez. I'm not 100% certain on that either. But anyway, these are the recommendations that... Wow, I did that twice, didn't I? At first base, there are guys that I've been talking about week after week, like Ty France, Alex Kirilloff. Ty France and Yahoo's owned 43%. Alex Kirilloff, 31%. The next guy on that list is probably Wilmer Flores. I do worry about the clustering of players on that team. They like Vossler more than they should at third base, but when Flores plays, he hits, and he plays enough when people are hurt. If that team was ever healthy, which probably will never happen, he might not be a guy, so he's probably more temporary than permanent, but he's a perfectly good guy in the thing. Very similarly is CJ Cron, who is a dynamo when he's playing at home. And when he's playing on the road, you can bench him for somebody else. Joey Votto returned this week. He's 26% owned, and I give him a recommendation. I did wind up picking back up Bobby Dahlbeck this week because in the 2.5 weeks that I did not have him on my team, he hit 286 with 3 home runs, which is the best 2.5 weeks he's had this year. Since returning to my team, he's 0 for 10. So I think that's completely my fault for whatever reason that is. So the big guys that I'm going to say I want in that group are France, Kirilloff, and Flores, with CJ Cron being just behind Flores by a little bit. And if you want somebody that you can be a little more comfortable being a permanent fixture in the as a regular, Cron's the guy. I know they like Connor Joe they like Connor Joe more than anybody else in the world does. At third base, we have a couple names that we talked about a great deal. The leadoff hitter for Cincinnati is only 49% roster. That's Jonathan India. You have Ty France at 43%. Again, Wilmer Flores also qualifies at third, and he's at 15%. The big new name for that grouping is Abraham Toro. He's hitting in that great lineup. He's actually hitting over 300 and all the other things. He's got some real power, and that is a guy to pick up. There's a couple other names in here, though I do have to cut a few of these out because, like I was going to recommend J.D. Davis when I first wrote this, but he got re-injured. I have no timetable on Nico Horner's return. John Berte is actually starting to steal base a little bit, and he's hitting over 300. He's a viable fill-in. Dylan Moore is a viable fill-in. Those are the guys. But the big three are, and in this order, at third base, it's India, France, Toro. In the deep leagues, I'm going to get the closers at the end. I do the closer report when I get through these things. I'm at first base, third base. Guest just joined the room and said that I'll go through everybody on the closing thing. It's a complete closer report. Everything you need to know will be in that, and it'll take about 15 minutes, but it is literally the last thing I do at around the 10-minute of 1 o'clock mark. And you'll get all the information you want and more. On the deeper leagues, Bowers is available at first base at 17%. Ryan O'Hearn at 0%. Ryan O'Hearn's an interesting character because he's had a couple weeks where he's been rosterable in the last 2 years and a lot of bad weeks. They sent him down to the minors after having a bad start this year. He's hit 2 home runs since he's come back in 4 games. When they sent him back to the minors, in his last 81 at-bats in the minors, he's hit 12 home runs, hitting 375. So maybe he's figured something out. If you had a reason to roster Castanera, you probably could roster him on the hope that this is real. And the truth is, he doesn't have to be that good to bat fourth for that team because they just don't have people. They got Merrifield, they got Perez, they got Benintendi who's out, and Albert Ramondes who's out. It's a team that he's going to get a big part of it. Lamont Wade's at 46 owned. Garrett Cooper always hits well when he plays, just doesn't play enough for my liking. A couple names that I normally would list in this grouping include Brandon Belt, J-Man Choi, and Mitch Moreland, but they sort of played themselves out of favor. Mitch Moreland did sit the last 3 days, but it was mostly because they were playing National League thing. There wasn't any DH, so he's going to sit more than you want. And I think Moreland needs regular reps, and I think there's something where the A's ballpark is hard to hit in. And I think of the jump that Simeon has moving from there to Toronto. As great as Moreland was when he was playing for Texas last year and Baltimore before that, I don't think we're going to see that between the A's ballpark and the way the A's manage their team. They don't let players get into a rhythm. They just don't. So I'm going to recommend Asdrubal Cabrera is 40% owned. He's starting to play more for the team. He's gotten into about 4 of the last 6 games. With the possible injury to Marte, if that lasts at all, I think that Cabrera will be the big beneficiary from that, because since his return, they've been trying to work him in, and they haven't been doing that good of a job of it. I'm also recommending, as a speculative good pickup, is that Ryan O'Hearn. You might find some power there that you didn't expect. On the rules says I have to go 3, so 3 deep. I'm going to go with Jake Bauers at 17. Ride that while you can. At third base, there's not a lot there. Asdrubal Cabrera is 40% owned. He's there. Maybe I'd speculate an injured Evan Longoria is a couple weeks away. He's 48% owned. Abraham Toro is a cheat because he's 56% rostered already. The only name that's new there is Andy Ibanez. I think that the Rangers' third base situation has been Brock Holt and Charlie Culberson, and there's reasons. Holt's good at on base. Culberson, I think, is better than people think, but I think that this time around, there's no reason why the Rangers aren't going to give Ibanez every chance they get. And, in AAA this year, he was at 352 with 6 home runs. In 2019, he had hit 20 home runs. There's a little bit of power there. You might find something there. He's going to get the opportunity to show if he can do something. He wasn't the highest prospect in the world, but you're looking at a situation where there is a lot of crap. There's almost nothing on the wire. He is probably the best shot at third base in NFBC right now. But I would also throw in there Asdrubal Cabrera at 44 and Abraham Toro at 56, which I know is a little bit of a cheat. So that's where we get there. Once again, we did say that. Oh, it also is Asdrubal Cabrera if the rumors about Eduardo Escobar are true, you're gonna find that he's gonna get more playing time too. So I guess Cabrera would be number 1, and Ibanez would be number 2, and actually Toro would be number 1 if he was actually under 56, if he's under 50. But I'm putting him number 3 because I know that's cheating a little bit. I'm not going to recommend you somebody who wouldn't take it. That's the point. You go through this thing, and people have different needs for what they're looking at on their waiver wire. Some people need a really good player. That's what it's like if you lose a good player in a 12-team league. Some people need the best that's something decent that's available, and some people need just something that'll work a little bit. The desperation move. And I'm going to talk about that's why we talk about so many players here. But moving on to shortstop. I guess it's first. I might have this in reverse order. Freddie Galvis of Baltimore. He's their shortstop. He's not hitting as well as he once was, and he slipped out of the number 2 hole, batting 6th. Of course, Wander Franco debuted Tuesday, and he's hitting 2nd. As I said, he's batting 105 so far this year. Just a home run and a double. In Detroit, Zach Short has been called up, and he started the past 2 games ahead of Harold Castro. That's kind of thing I'm thinking about with Ibanez. Like, Zach Short is a guy that you want to. They kind of know what Harold Castro is. Give Zach Short a shot. I don't have as high hopes for Zach Short, but I do need to mention him because he's there. The Tigers did option at second base their higher prospect, Isaac Paredes. Philadelphia recalled Nick Meton, and that's the one that, with Titi Rivers being out, though he's on rehab coming back, like that's really eating into Brad Miller's time, and I think that it's going to. Any hope that I had for Luke Williams is strung out by the fact that they actually like Meton better than those guys. Brad Miller is out, of course. In Baltimore, Pat Valleca is the second baseman, so he's a guy that I've talked about in the past. His nickname is, for some reason, Patty Barrels, even though you've never heard of him. But, if you put together his last going this year, put together his last 162 games. He did hit 26 home runs his last 162 games. Just hasn't a chance to start. Admittedly, some of those are in Colorado, but he's somebody that has always been somebody I'm watching, and I've talked about him before. With the Angels, Luis Rengifo is batting atop the lineup, either second or first. He's playing outfield. He's got a 6-game outfield. He's not that good of a player. They got him in a trade from Tampa Bay Rays. In the minors, he was a pretty good stolen base guy, but he's one of those guys, much like Jack Peterson, who stole bases in the minors, who just gets thrown out way too much in the majors and never really brought back that side of the game. Rengifo, that was the big part of his game. He was a good fielder who could run. He's had 30-plus stolen bases in the minors. In the majors, I don't think he's ever had a year where he hasn't been thrown out at least 10 times. Thrown out as much as he's stolen. So I don't have high hopes for that. I'd much rather see Jose Iglesias batting in that spot, but that's what they're doing. Boston recalled Michael Chavis, and they're batting him first, and he's a guy that doesn't take a walk, strikes out a lot, which is a really odd leadoff hitter. I don't know if that'll stick, but I'm wondering who the guy is that they put in. If Jarren Duran were called up, he'd be the ideal leadoff hitter in that spot. In Tampa Bay, it seems like lately, even though he hasn't been playing all that well, definitely not up to preseason expectations, Brandon Lau has been batting leadoff for them. So maybe this is a chance for him to turn it on. In Colorado, Chris Owings, who I do really have high hopes of. He's still batting 400 on the year, even though he's only played one game since his return as DH and went 0 for 3. He has 2 doubles, 3 triples. I think he's going to get in there. He's being blocked by Jonathan Daza, who is hitting like 324, but is giving you really nothing besides that. No home runs, no stolen bases. And if the hitting drops off, which it should eventually drop off, Owings is going to take over in there and be something pretty darn good for very little money. And Luis Arias is leading off for the Twins, which gets us to our second base and shortstop things. In the Yahoo leagues, the shallower leagues, there are some pretty good names available. And there are guys that we talked about in the past. We talked about J.P. Crawford at length last week, former number 1 guy, still hitting pretty well for Seattle. Miles Straw of the Astros is available. Dylan Moore, which we talked about just earlier, I think it was 45% rostered. Willie Adames, he's one of the guys that I really like, batting 286 with a 351 on-base percentage with 6 home runs since coming to Milwaukee 15 games ago. I think that the Milwaukee version of Willie Adames is rosterable in 12-team leagues. And then Josh Rojas, who's leading off, and a guy that I wish somebody I like going into the seasons, hit pretty well all year long, and I do not have him in any team because somebody else liked them more than me. So those are my 3. Those are any of those 5 are worthwhile. The big 3 for me would be Adames, number 1, Rojas, number 2, Crawford, number 3, Straw, number 4. The big pull for Straw is the lineup that he's in. As long as they're hitting, he's going to look a lot better than he is. At second base in Yahoo leagues, we're going to name some names we've already named before, like Josh Rojas, Dylan Moore, Tony Kemp, Ty France, Jonathan India, all less than 50% owned. Wilmer Flores is 15% owned. The only name that I'm going to add in here, even though he just got hurt, so I just got to pull him, is Colton Wong. We got to see what happened with that. And Rudy Odor is those are the guys. Rudy Odor is actually a deep league guy, but he is hitting 320 over his last 14 days. And Odor is a guy that really hits on streaks. And so if he's going to be a 230 hitter for the year, but he's going to have a couple of runs that are really good, and he might be on the cusp of a run. So even in the shallower leagues, it might be worth a gamble to gamble on Rudy Odor. But because we've already talked about these guys before, we're not going into great detail. 1, 2, 3 are going to be India, France, and Josh Rojas. In the deeper leagues, Tony Kemp is available at 46%. Rudy Odor is 27% rostered. Michael Chavis 7%, and Chris Owings 5%. That's where Chris Owings fits at this point. So those are the recommendations there, which brings us to the catcher spot, which actually I do have a recommendation at catcher, a new recommendation at catcher. But we'll go through the thing. New York Mets claimed Baltimore Orioles' chances go off waivers. Dalton Varsho is up for Arizona, but he actually is playing catcher, not outfield, so he's not getting innings you might see. But he might get an extra game or two versus some other guys by filling in the outfield once in a while. In Cincinnati, Tyler Stevenson is, with the return of Joey Votto, is still batting cleanup versus lefties, and they're moving Votto to fifth. But that actually is hurting both Barnhart's and Stevenson's playing time. In Detroit, it looks like they've turned things completely over to Haas and Rogers. And Jake Rogers has caught 4 of the last 6 games. And Eric Haas, the other catcher, has played 4 of the 6 last games because he DH'd one game and he played outfield another. Both are viable players in 2 catcher leagues that are deep. Don't really want to give a lot on the way of recommendations, but I did notice that Mike Zunino is only 25% owned. If you can eat the average, the home runs are really nice. Navarez at 48 is a borderline must-start guy. Max Stassi right now is showing something pretty special at 38, and he's probably the one guy that you really should pick up in that situation. In the deeper leagues, over last 32 at-bats, Pee Wee Reese McGuire of the Toronto Blue Jays is 15 for 32 with 1 home run. And it is kind of crazy because they had Dan Jensen come up, then Reese come up, and then Kirk come up, all playing catcher. And it seemed like each one, like Reese was a little bit better hitter than Jansen, and that Kirk was even better hitter than Reese. And somehow Reese McGuire got forgotten about, but he's barely owned. I'm gonna make a claim on him this week. And with Kirk out on the 60-day, as well as he's been hitting, he's definitely other. And and ever since Douglas is on video, should the little chat. Oh yeah, I didn't check that. Oh. I didn't see anything over there. Luis Torrens, since coming back from the minors, has been hitting 375 with 5 home runs. That's pretty darn good. You got him on TV now. Who's Bobo? It's nice to see you, Bobo. And that gets us through the catchers and all the hitters. We're on off to the pitchers at 41 to go. I didn't spend as much time on the pitchers. Not that there isn't some decent things in here. The notes are mostly about optioning of players. Dean Kramer is optioned by Baltimore. Cleveland did sign Brad Peacock to a minor league contract. They're hurting for pitchers. They have a way of finding guys that just seem to turn up. Jackson Cora of Kansas City, as well as Corbin Martin of Arizona, both were optioned. The Angels signed Brian Johnson to a minor league contract from the Red Sox. Hi, Doug. Yeah, we're all getting older. You like my new earphones? These are new. I got them from Amazon Prime on Prime Day. It's $13. And you can't see it, but I put a hook up there so that I won't put them on the ground and step on them like I did the last pair. Doing all right here. Doing all right. New York Mets selected the contract of Tyler McGill. He poses some interest to me because it's kind of a crazy thing. Like, he's a tall pitcher with a decent pitch mix, pitching in for a half a decent team. Much like Bailey Ober of the Minnesota Twins. I went to look at Bailey Ober's ownership rates in NFBC, and Bailey Ober is owned in 79% of leagues, which I think is crazy because McGill is more apt to pitch more innings. I know you shouldn't just compare one guy to one guy, but I think McGill should be owned more than Bailey Ober. They're both tall guys where the tallness helps them to be better pitchers. And McGill's got a better pitch mix. And the Oakland A's optioned Jesus Luzardo. So in the deep leagues, and like I said, we're gonna get to that. Those are right at 12:50 because we're right on time. I always said one of my goals here is because I heard from the people that download my podcast that many of them will listen at 125 speed is to put so much information in that I can't listen at 125. They might have to actually slow it down to hear everything that I say. Because I'm not talking to anybody, so I'm just talking as fast as I normally do. When I was growing up in Chicago, where people talk a little faster. Anyway, there's some interesting names on the Yahoo side that are worth picking up. Ross Stripling, Patrick Sandoval. Patrick Sandoval, ever since playing Houston about 7 weeks back, he had that 4-run 2-inning outing, but since then he's got a 3.13 ERA with 32 strikeouts, 31.2 innings. And strikeouts are a thing that is hard to come by. Derek Scuball still out there. I know his last outing was less than you'd like. Zach Davies threw no hitters, owned in 32% of leagues. Caleb Smith and Drew Smiley. Drew Smiley gets numbers back at 21. I'm not saying I want to bank my team around him, but he's more than a capable fill-in. The other guys, the three guys that I really think should be, let's go four, because two guys are kind of the same. There's two very young guys, well, three. Logan Gilbert, Albert Elsley, Shane McClanahan all are worthy of roster spot to see what they can do. They've shown a lot of good stuff. Above them, I guess you could throw Tarek Subban. And above them is Jake Odorizzi, who's only 43% owned. Reliever efficiency metric. And then, so you got that going for you. In the deeper leagues, I'm having this really tough time because I think there's something to like in Washington with Joe Ross and Eric Fedde. Eric Fedde is owned at 39%, Ross in 34%. But I don't want to have both, and I keep picking the wrong one. I think Joe Ross is probably the better of the two. Neither of those are my big things. Kobe Allard's on 32% of teams. He's had a pretty good run this year. He had such a horrible. I mean, Kobe Allard last year in my TGFBI league literally cost me. I was in 21st place overall, and in second place in my league. And he alone moved me to 6th place in my league and to 61st overall with one of the worst weeks you'll ever see in any baseball league ever. And it's just, I can't touch that thing, but the numbers don't lie. And in that sort of thing, you might pick him up. I won't, not because he isn't any good, and he might be good on your team, but I can't do that. It's like if you drink too much vodka and you throw up 25 times, you just don't want to touch the vodka again. There's nothing wrong with vodka. There's some great vodkas out there. But it's just not for the guy that always throws up on it. Vlad Gutierrez of Cincinnati and Tony Santillan of Cincinnati are both available in 54% of leagues available. Vlad, Tony Santillan is only owned at 7% rate. That last outing with Atlanta is really tantalizing with Santillan, and I thought that in the minors that Santillan was actually a little bit of a better pitcher. I think I might go for Santillan or possibly that Tyler McGill over the Ross Fedde mistake-prone thing that I have. So those are your names. So of those, I can't give everybody a throw-throated like you gotta have them, but there's reasons like Allard, there's reasons like McGill, there's reasons like Santillan. Those are the three that I'm picking up a bunch. And that brings us to what everyone was waiting for, the closer report. I'm going to start by talking about the transactions and moves that happened in closer because there's some interesting things here. One is in Arizona. Where is this at? Arizona DFA'd Stephen Crichton, right? They also called up, they didn't call it, but J.P. Buskowskis returned from injury list, and they claimed Brett DeGois off of waivers from Texas Rangers, who was not pitching very well for the Rangers, and he was a Rule 5 choice that they drew from the Los Angeles Dodgers. And the Dodgers, I guess, didn't want him back. And that's happened more than I ever thought. It happened with Kaya Tom. It happened with a few other players this year. I've never seen that where it's like, nah, just keep him. So go ahead and DFA him. But DeGois going into the COVID year had this string of like 34 consecutive scoreless innings in the minors, and he looked really good. And he was one of those guys that just the Dodgers do that they come out of nowhere and just looks really good. I think having the year off and not being a core player has hurt the guy. But you can see that Arizona is trying to do things to revamp their bullpen because they all really stink. And I always say that with the report, it's like go for the guy that the team likes. Go with the guy with the most talent. I think that J.P. Buskowskis is a good pickup. Philadelphia, another place where they're having a real problem is Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, they selected the contract with Natali Perez. They've also sent Brandon Kitzler to rehab. And they're going through a thing where their coach says that Alvarado's their new closer, and he blows his first save. There's something going on there. You might have to watch that a little bit closer and see what goes on with that. Baltimore DFA'd Mickey Janis. I marked it out because I like knuckleball pitchers, and it's always fun to watch knuckle. Atlanta selected the contract of both Tanner Rourke and Jesse Chavez. Jesse Chavez is a good relief pitcher. Keenan Middleton was recalled in Seattle. When he was up last time, he was in the mix for saves in lieu of the very, very much struggling Rafael Montero. I thought that Drew Steckenrider will take that spot, but I think Steckenrider and Keenan may battle out for that spot. Toronto signed John Axford, who pitched very well for Team Canada, is the guy there. So here we'll go through the close report. Those are the motions of this thing, right? The closers I consider safe are Boston's Matt Barnes, New York's Aroldis Chapman, despite his blown save. Toronto's Jordan Romano has moved into that spot. White Sox Liam Hendricks, Houston's Ryan Presley, the Angels Raisel Iglesias, Atlanta's Will Smith. Even though he's been a little bit of a shaky pitcher, he did convert 3 saves this week, and he converts more than he doesn't. But he's the guy that makes you nervous when he closes, but he'll get you the saves. It's funny when you type in the wrong thing. Miami's Jimmy Garcia, not my favorite of the bunch, but he is their closer. I put down New York Mets Lewin Diaz, which is, of course, Edwin Diaz. He's safe. Brad Hand in Washington. Craig Kilber's been outstanding for the Cubs. Josh Hader's also outstanding. Rich Rodriguez from Pittsburgh is very good, though he's in that group that might get traded. Alex Reyes is in that group. Kenley Jansen is in that group. Mark Melanson in that group. Ian Kennedy is sort of in that group, but kind of weirdly, like every time they have a save chance, he's somehow unavailable. Like because they don't get that many in Texas. He had one on Wednesday, and apparently he had flu symptoms that day. So and for the first time in history, somebody converted there. So this is what happened this week on the closer side. In Baltimore, they only had 1 save this week, and it went to Cole Sulzer, but it was a 10th inning save. They went to Paul Fry in the 9th. He wound up getting the win. Paul Fry is the guy, I guess, that the thing is pointing at as their closer. In Boston, Adam Ottavino got his 5th save. Matt Barnes is the closer. This is the 5th time he got it when Barnes was unavailable. I think that Adam Ottavino is among the elite middle relievers because you're looking at a guy with 14 holds and 5 saves and really good peripheral numbers, really good ERA and WHIP. In Tampa Bay, Diego Garcia got the only save they had this week on Friday. Firerson's number 2 in that committee, and Fairbanks is number 3. Castillo's the only one. I can see rostering Castillo or Firerson. I'm not really a fan of Fairbanks, except for in holds leagues. In Cleveland, they're certainly a committee, and they're both good. Right now, the needle's pointing to Karinchak, but it won't be long until it points back to Glace, and they're both perfectly solid. In Detroit, Michael Fulmer blew his only opportunity on Saturday in Game 2, which you might say, well, at least they gave him the chance. But they had an opportunity in Game 1, didn't go to Fulmer, and that guy converted that save, and that wasn't Gregory Soto. That was Joel Cisnero. So that is definitely a committee. I think the most talented of the pitchers is Michael Fulmer, and the least talented is Joel Cisnero. But those things are going to come on, and there's reasons for them to pitch Michael Fulmer. And it is Mike Fulmer's first. It was his first save op since returning from the IL. He had pitched 1 game before, so you might give him a little bit of a slack. In Kansas City, they definitely have a committee. Greg Holland has saved a game, and he also blew a game this week. He seems to be the shakiest arm of their committee, and also the most likely to get a save chance. So it kind of goes in. It's one thing where if you could, you'd stay away from. I like the way Barlow's been pitching. I like the way that Zimmer's been pitching. And they've been using him as an opener. And Stelmon is the guy that everybody loves. But Holland's the guy, if you're really just looking just for saves, he'd be the guy that I would pick. The other stuff might scare you a little bit, and he's not going to get as many saves as Will Smith to make up for a 3.72 or a 3.85 ERA. In Oakland, they only had 1 save opportunity this week, and they gave it to Diekman, and he blew it. I do believe it's a committee, but Lou Trevino is the lead dog in that committee. In Seattle, Kendall Greenman is the closer. He had the 1 save, but they have the penchant to deploy him in higher level situations, giving slave opportunities to other people. I think the first guy to go to is Drew Steckenrider, but I'm not ruling out Keenan Middleton. And I already told you that about Ian Kennedy missing that 1 game. So the one thing that was different was every time that they've had a save opportunity that Kenny's not been there until this Wednesday when he was sick, somebody blew the save for the Rangers. But this time they converted it, and the guy who converted it was named Joely Rodriguez, which I guess that tells you something because everyone thinks Kennedy will, if he's the only guy that can close in that thing, when Kennedy gets traded, that's the name to keep in mind. In Philadelphia, one save went to Hector Neris this week after they said he wasn't going to get the saves. But everybody in that bullpen, Neris twice, Alvarado once, Archie Bradley once, even Ranger Suarez blew a save except for Connor Brogdon, who's hurt. Except for Connor Brogdon, who's hurt. So, like, everybody is in that. And then they had those moves they made this week. They sent Kinsler to rehab, and they activated Neftali Feliz. Both those guys have save experience. You're probably going to see people getting the opportunity to mess with that bullpen. I'd probably stay away from that for now. I've always been a fan of Neftali Feliz's stuff, and Kinsler is the kind of guy that just gets the job done. I think both those guys are better than what they're putting on the field right now. So it's one of those things. And John Exford is still playing. He played for Team Canada, USA qualifying, and he signed a minor league contract with Toronto, which is also a Canadian team, as he is a Canadian national. He looked good. He looked good in those things. Canada didn't advance, but he looked good in those games. And of course, there's that. So there's something going on. There's something pretty serious shaking up in Arizona. Something pretty serious shaking up in Philadelphia. Right now, the guys of those two groups I like is JP Buzzkowski, based on the fact that he has the best stuff. And in Philadelphia, I'm probably going to go in Philadelphia. I bet you before too long, Brandon Kinsler's their closer. In Cincinnati, Lucas Sims and TJ Antone went to the IL. So their new committee is Amir Garrett and Brad Bratch. And Garrett had 2 saves. His ERA is deceptively bad because he had some pretty bad outings early on. I'm not saying his ERA is great, but he's actually functional and should be rostered. He'll be one of the guys I'm recommending. In Arizona, they say that Joakim Soria is their closer, but who really knows because they don't really have save opportunities. They haven't blown a save on the road in over 24 games, which is pretty good. Of course, the one thing that helps out is they've always been down by more than 3 runs in all their road games. I don't know what you really want there, but Buzzkowski is a talent. In Colorado, another one that is Daniel Bard is the closer, but he's just not that good. It seemed like going into this week that he was bad in the games that he played at home, which sort of made sense, and he was pretty darn good in the games that he played on the road. So he'd kind of like get shaky. People would start doubting him, then he'd go on the road and he'd earn his job back. But this week he blew a save on the road, which doesn't bode well there. But he does have the second best ERA in their entire bullpen. And the guy who's number 1 has an ERA of 4.56, which is 0.04 higher than him. So Bard's the guy you want if you really, really are a masochistic baseball player. In San Francisco, the Tyler Rogers, Jake McGee thing is a committee. 1 save went to McGee this week. It seems like Rogers has better numbers and McGee has better stuff. I would prefer to have McGee of the 2 guys in there. So you get to the point where you have recommendations. And it's pretty rare that you can recommend guys that actually will get saves, but this week is like that. Michael Fulmer is in Yahoo leagues is only owned in 33% of leagues. Gregory Soto, 21. Both those guys are going to get saves. Daniel Bard, as shaky as he is owned in less than half of leagues. In Yahoo, Hansel Robas, who's part of the team in Minnesota, 29%. Drew Steckenrider is 0%. I think he's going to be part of that thing. Kendall Graveman, even though he's over 50, is only at 54%. And he's actually a very talented pitcher. And you also have guys like Fires and Fairbanks. In the deeper leagues, Amir Garrett, 24% rostered. That's a guy. I'm thinking. I have Michael Fulmer. I might want Amir Garrett better than that. The only thing that would keep me from doing that is that Cincinnati has literally completely overturned their bullpen like 3 times this year, where like their closers are like they're always committee, but it's a different group of people in the committee, and I don't believe that they'll stick with Garrett unless he does what we thought he might do at the beginning of the season and just lock down and put his name on that job, which he's not been able to do. So Greg Holland, 46%. Like I said, he's the ugly closer. He's the ugly, more often than not, closer of the Kansas City Royals. You have Drew Seckenrider. Brad Bach is in the mix in Cincinnati, and he is 0% owned. Why not throw a dollar on him if you're really desperate for saves? And Jose Alvarado, 28%. Owned in NFBC leagues, is part of that cluster in Philadelphia. But right now, before the new guys come in, he's the guy that you probably want. Interestingly enough, in the middle relief space, a couple guys have jumped into the kind of middle reliever that you'd want. You know, we've talked in the past about Andrew Kittredge, TJ Antone, who's hurt, Brent Suter, Seth Lugo, Yusmiro Petit, Jonathan Loaisaga. We're going to throw JP Buskauskas in that mix because even if he's not the closer, he's going to – Arizona's pitch staff is bad. He's going to pitch middle relief, and I think that he can have some really, really good numbers there without the closing. The other guy is the way that Tampa Bay is using Colin McHugh. He's jumped into the kind of middle reliever that you want to own, which brings us to those are the recommendations. The recommendations are, well, they're exactly what they sound like. Amir Garrett, Michael Fulmer, Hansel Robles. I'd speculate on Drew Seckenrider. And that is all the players at every position and a bunch of recommendations. My primary recommendations this week were Stephen Duggar, Tony Kemp, Agil Baddoo, Cole Calhoun, Alex Kirilloff, Jared Duran, Ty France, Wilmer Flores, Ryan O'Hearn, Jonathan India, Abraham Toro, Andy Ibanez, J.P. Crawford, William Davis, Chris Owings, Pee Wee Weeks McGuire. And the reason I call it Pee Wee Weeks McGuire is because much like Pee Wee Herman was caught doing something in a theater that Reese McGuire was caught doing in front of a Dollar General, and he'll always be Pee Wee Reese McGuire to me. Jake Odorizzi is in that group. Tony Santillan, Amir Garrett, Michael Fulmer, Colin McHugh, and J.P. Buskauskas. Before we get to the very end, I want to look at there. There are some. Andrea's talking about Kyle Freeland in a situational start, and John Carlos Mejia in a situational start. I don't really do that stuff. There is a place for that in baseball, but I don't really. In fantasy baseball, I don't. In most of my leagues, it's hard to do that. It just is. I know if you're in a league, like I have one league where there's pretty much free for all on picking up players. I can theoretically do it in that, but because that league's shallow, these guys are just not at that level. But she's recommending Gene Carlos Mejia of Cleveland and Kyle Freeland of Pittsburgh. And the one guy I looked at pretty hard is Quantrill of Cleveland. Just as I was thinking about picking up, he did have a bad start the last time out, but going up to that, it looked like he had a nice little run, and Cleveland does need people. And who did I say they picked up this week? Well, I forget. Opening question: how will you rank Makata, Owings, Kalenic, Eloy, Bruhan rest of season? Got a good squad looking for upside rest of the way. Okay, rest of season. That's really tough. I'm going to tell you things based on my opinion. People are going to tell you different things on this, right? Eloy, we got the news on Eloy Jimenez that he's probably going to come back about a month earlier than we thought, which means instead of September, he might be back in August. In those 2 months, I'm pretty certain that he'll outperform Kalenic and Bruhan. I like Owings a lot more than most people do. Yeah, that's what I said, August, right? No, the good news is that he's going to be back for 2 months instead of. But you're looking at, I believe it with Jared Kalenic. Jared Kalenic did what Seattle wanted them to do. Seattle wanted to not call him up until he was past Super 2s, and he pushed the issue, and it became a national thing. And Seattle loves the fact that he came up and hit so bad that unless he's hitting 500 in the minors, he's in the minors for just the rest of the year. And that's why they made a trade for Wyatt Matheson, because they're not thinking that Kalenic's coming back. Because if they don't bring him back, he's not Super 2, even though they brought him up early. That's the key. So I don't expect anything out of Kalenic. I mean, in one league where we have this one minor league spot, though it's a 5 keeper, and I have Kalenic in as like a 17th round pick, and I would swap out that spot for Jarren Duran, and I still might do that because I think Jarren Duran will be a better player this year than Kalenic because Kalenic just won't play. Yeah, Andrea is he's not going to help anyone out. The best you're going to hope for him is he's going to be up like at the last 3 weeks of the year and hit, maybe hit 3 or 4 home runs in that span because he's kind of figured it out finally. But they're going to keep him down because that's what they wanted to do from the get-go. And Clinic wrapped it up like a birthday present and said, "Here, I am so horrible, keep me down." Anyway, who are the other guys in this grouping here? Moncada. So I think Moncada will be the number one in that group based purely on volume. It may not be all the great stuff that he once thought it would be. He doesn't steal like he once did, but because he's going to play the whole way, he will probably out-homer Eloy Jimenez. I think that Chris Owings would be number 2, and these are both volume plays over the other guys. I said this before, and I know we're going over the hour a little bit, but I believe that the people who are minor league prospects got hurt the most by taking last year off. And you see these guys come up, and they don't look just kind of bad. I mean, they look pretty darn awful. Clinic looked pretty darn awful. Kirilloff looked pretty darn awful until he didn't. Castillo looked pretty darn awful. A lot of these guys, the best rookie player coming up is actually Ben Kirilloff since he had the turnaround, but it's been Trevor Larnach, and I was going, he's been actually better than you think, but he's really only like a 250 hitter with a handful of home runs. There's nothing special there, and so I like Brujan, and I did say in one thing that there was that question about would you trade Brujan for Castillo, and I said you could get more for Brujan than just Castillo, and I think you could get Castillo for less than Brujan. I still don't think that he's going to be that helpful this year. But when you're talking about minor leaguers, I just make the assumption you're talking about some level of a dynasty league because so few minor leaguers are going to make any impact this year. You look at, there's a couple that are okay, but so I got Moncada 1, Owings 2, Eloy 3, Brujan 4, Clinic 5. That's my ranking of those 5 guys. Oh, Lordy Douglas. No, about what? Is it talking about the Castillo thing? And the fact that Castillo's a weird guy. And this really is like, I asked this question, and it was something that I'm going to bring up on the. What are we doing here? It's not a big deal. I can cut this off if I want to. I was looking at splits, like who's good in the second half of the season, who's good in the first half of the season, and so I asked. I actually had the right Baseball Reference and Fangraphs. I'm like, hey, how are you treating the 2020 season in terms of first half, second half? Is it all first half? Is it all second half? I don't really know. But the guy I was really looking at I was looking at Luis Castillo because Luis Castillo came up that 1 year, played basically the second half of the season and played very well. Then he had a second year, which was kind of just, it was a 4+ ERA, kind of a full season. Then he had that year that looks really good on paper, that 340 season. But if you look at it real closely, his second half ERA was 4.75. And in August, September, his ERA was above 5. Admittedly, the first half he had a 2.21 ERA. He's a guy that just, and so the idea that anybody would think that Castillo could pitch 200 good innings had no basis in the past, but it was because his halves were muddled. He got that good call-up first half of his first year put into his second half, which made his second halves look not as bad. And that first half of 2019 was so good that when he finishes up with a 3.40 ERA, you're like, wow, that's still a pretty decent year. But the truth is, his ERA moved from the 220s to 3.40 in a matter of 2 months. Even last year, his last outing, he let up 5 runs to jump his ERA above into the 3.20 range from under 2. I don't know if he has the stamina to get through there. And that's one of my biggest worries about this year, which is also something I bring up on the show. Right now, is one of the things I said at the beginning, Sandy Alcantara and Trevor Bauer have pitched a little over 100 innings, which is what the top pitchers pitched last year. So now we're getting to the point where almost every pitcher, outside the ones that were injured or didn't start right away or whatever, have pitched about as many innings as they pitched last year. And so we're in this unbridled territory. I know that, I believe that a lot of these guys do it. I have no doubt that Trevor Bauer can pitch 190 innings. I have no doubt that Adam Wainwright can pitch 190 innings, guys that have done it for years. But I have a lot of doubt about the guys that really haven't done it, like Castillo, like Corbin Burns, like guys that are on that I actually have my team, Terry Screwballs of the world, or the Alex Manoahs. Guys I like and guys I don't like. Half of Alcantara will pull it off, but Trevor Rogers, it's like we're asking these guys to pitch 260% more innings this year at a high stress level than they had last year. And anyone that says they know that how it's going to work out is really just guessing and lying to you. But it's going to work out in ways, and there's going to be some guys that are going to be surprisingly good, and there's going to be some guys that are going to be surprisingly bad. And it's like there was a reason why this year before the season I drafted what I called my all geezer starting pitcher staff. It's like I look at my 15-team league, and I'm in 6th place with 91 points, and almost all of the place to make up space is in on the pitching side. And while my pitchers are guys that nobody here would have any problem with, I have Zach Greinke and Adam Wainwright and Charlie Morton and like these older guys that are just decent guys that have already shown that they've done it. I'm going to move up the thing while these guys get pulled for fewer innings and for worse innings because they've never done these detailed things. Anyway, well, that's it. I'm going to go to the very end. I do appreciate Bobo, Daniel, guest Selena. That looks like Matt Hooper. All these guys for joining us. It's a lot better thing when I can talk about things that are interactive. I did cover everything you probably need to know that happened last week. We're going into another week of things, another week of stuff. This week, the AL leader in batting average is Michael Brantley. The NL leader in batting average is Nicholas Castillo. The American League leader in wins is Aaron Civale, who's on the IL with 10. Brantley's hitting 349. Castillo's hitting Castellanos is hitting 348. Kyle Hendricks leads the National League with 10 wins. These stats are important, no matter what stat fanatics tell you. The win's the most important stat in the game. And the pitcher win is the most reflective of a team win of any other stat except for the save. I will see you again next week, and of course Monday night on the Dugout, 8 p.m. Join us there, and thank you for showing up. Not yet. I want to do this one.